Hello, and we're live.
Yes, we are live. I don't know for how long, but we are live.
You didn't like the copyright infringing music set to a series of building implosions?
Oh no, it was terrific. I personally think that every video should start out like that, especially when covering let's say questionable topics.
Questionable topics. Are you suggesting that the Oklahoma City bombing didn't happen?
No, I'm a truther.
I too am a truther. The evidence is incontrovertible, even though they covered up the evidence by also imploding the remains of the Murrah building.
The evidence factory.
Yep. So, how have you been, Hudson?
Oh, I'm doing great, coming off of a cold, which is why we didn't meet last week for our first ever live stream on the Tukey's Mag channel, but here we are.
Yes. And the week before that, I was getting hit by a hurricane. Never in danger, but still getting hit by a hurricane. So I guess we should just pick up where we left off.
I suppose so. If you're joining us for the first time, we have 2 pre-recorded episodes on the Tukey's Mag channel that you can catch up on. We are reading Dr. Wendy Painting's
Wendy Painting
excellent
PhD.
yes, Dr. Wendy Painting PhD's excellent book, Aberration in the Heartland of the Real: The Many Lives of Timothy McVeigh.
And we're starting off at the Oklahoma Dissidents, Dancing with the Devil.
Yeah, so if you have your own copy at home, feel free to follow along.
Yeah, and if you need to put your kids to sleep, this will be one of those things that might haunt them when they're older, but they'll definitely be bored to death. You should find it very entertaining, though. All right, let's get on into it. Acts of terrorism are complex and multi-layered, and those who survive them have equally complex reactions. Although not often acknowledged, those who survive the trauma of terroristic violence must also contend with state, legal, and media institutions whose policies sometimes lead to further traumatization. In order to regain equilibrium and make sense of nonsensical events, victims take the available fragments of information about the event and use them to construct a survivor's narrative. Victims undergo additional compounded traumatization when critical information remains unknown, a situation that prevents them from constructing a believable narrative about their pain. The most salient need for information was experienced by the bombing survivors and victims' family members, many of whom later recounted their early and ongoing reliance on media to provide it. What a mistake that was. Not that they had a lot of options at the time, of course. Coinciding with Jones's struggle with the FBI, Jones being
Stephen Jones, the
Stephen
attorney
Jones,
for Mr. Timothy McVeigh.
Yes, the lead defense attorney. With the FBI and the prosecutors over the discovery material, and reflective of the larger struggle for information about the case and control of this information, was the parallel struggle of a group of survivors and victim family members, whom Ambrose Evans Pritchard dubbed the Oklahoma City Dissidents. Since the bombing, the dissidents had become increasingly alarmed about what they perceived to be the FBI's incremental abandonment of its search for other conspirators and the DOJ's lack of concern over prosecuting them. They became increasingly vocal in the media about their lingering questions. The dissidents wondered, was there a wider conspiracy? Did anyone who could have warned victims, even federal law enforcement officials, know of the bomb plot beforehand? Was a government informer involved?
Terrible name for a band, but an
The
excellent
Oklahoma
name.
Dissidents?
Yes, but an excellent name for a group of dissidents from Oklahoma.
Good name for an OGC chapter. In November 1995, led by Oklahoma State Rep. Charles Key, the dissidents petitioned to form and impanel a state grand jury investigation to uncover new information about the bombing plot and, if possible, identify other conspirators. While the dissidents were eventually successful in impaneling the jury, they faced significant and heavy-handed institutional resistance in doing so. A grand jury, by the way, is a body formed to bring charges, which is mostly atrophied into a rubber stamp jury duty kind of thing in the modern day. But this would have been a true grand jury in the classic sense. Prosecutors and officials publicly accused the dissidents of engaging in paranoid delusions and pandering to the worst kind of paranoid conspiracy theories. News reports and editorials repeatedly echoed such sentiments, quoting experts, officials, and watchdog groups who compared the suspicions and speculations of the dissidents and others about the bombing case to Holocaust denial, and claimed that such expressions were indicative of the same delusional and dangerous extremism that had created the ideological atmosphere for the bombing in the first place.
Where have we seen this playbook before?
Boy, it's almost like every time someone disagrees with the narrative.
The one time something happens and we're not allowed to question how and why it happened.
Yeah, and if you bring up anything about another thing, you just bring up the that thing. Thus, the dissidents were equated symbolically with Timothy McVeigh himself, an ironic twist foreshadowing many more to come. Those most deeply impacted by the bombing, an act committed by a crazed conspiracy theorist, were now themselves labeled as conspiracy theorists. Nevertheless, the dissidents gained popular support and were featured in an ABC News segment of 2020 that highlighted some of the known and missing evidence that fueled the growing speculations, rumors, and theories. In two opinion polls at the time, 80 to 90% of Oklahomans favored the formation of a grand jury. 13,500 Oklahoma City residents signed the petition, 5,000 more than required by state law. After a lengthy and bitter public campaign and appeals process, the Oklahoma Supreme Court unanimously ruled in favor of the formation of the grand jury. However, while Key would head the investigation, to the dismay of the dissidents, Oklahoma District Attorney Robert Macy, lead prosecutor in both McVeigh's and Nichols' trials, and the most aggressive opponent of the grand jury's formation, was appointed to oversee the grand jury hearings and determine what information could be presented. Nevertheless, Key established the OKC Bombing Investigation Committee, made up of volunteers and a professional research staff who would conduct their own investigation and gather evidence.
Government investigates corruption and finds themselves innocent.
Yes, it's almost like yes. It is the fox guarding the hen house. The only less qualified person to have done that would have been Timothy McVeigh. Kathy Wilburn Sanders, whose two grandsons had died in the bombing, became one of the most outspoken dissidents. She wrote that the group's need for answers was so overwhelming that they were willing to dance with the devil to get the truth. For the dissidents, the devil resided in the details. Evans Pritchard wrote, "Documents have a habit of leaking when friendships are formed across a broad front. Therefore, in order to solve the mystery, the dissidents formed an unholy alliance with a number of individuals and groups. The alliance, which traded information like baseball cards, included the Jones team, victims' families, sympathetic investigative journalists, fringe conspiracy theorists, and the mainstream media. The devil, all of whom were pursuing similar lines of inquiry about the facts surrounding the bombing."
It sounds like your typical dissident right group chat.
It truly does, except there are no FBI agents.
Right.
The unlikely hodgepodge of allied truth seekers, I meant there were no FBI agents in this.
Oh, I see.
The unlikely hodgepodge of allied truth seekers painstakingly retraced the steps McVeigh had allegedly taken on his road to right-wing extremism. Along the way, I'm yawning so much. Along the way, they encountered the vast network of parties with whom McVeigh had crossed paths and possibly conspired. Like the research communities that sprang up after the JFK assassination, the OKC-BIC tapped an enormous but obscure knowledge base, and gathered, compiled, and categorized a wealth of previously unknown information pertaining to the bombing plot.
Okay, so do you think like the BIC pen
OKC
company
BIC.
has a Oklahoma City manufacturing plant?
They this was product placement. It was the most ill-conceived product placement. They just wanted they bought the naming rights to the grand jury.
Second to not Penske, Ryder.
In terms of bad branding ideas.
You got to make sure you tell them it was a Ryder truck, not just a rental truck.
Not just any rental, a Ryder. Let's see. The information uncovered additional wrinkles of complexity in an already complex situation that, although often raising more questions than it answered, proved irrefutably damning to the government's story. The combined investigatory efforts led to revelations about its prior knowledge of the bombing and shed light on the possible identities of several other conspirators. Among the most publicized of these revelations were those concerning McVeigh's relationship to the cast of characters residing in or frequently visiting Elohim City, including Andreas Strassmeyer, Andy the German, a German national living in the U.S. on a retired visa and head of paramilitary training at Elohim City.
They could have really used a Trump for the nicknames.
What? Oh,
we call him Andy the German.
We call him Andy the German because he's German.
His name's Andy.
It rolls off the tongue. We got a lot of Andys, so we need to disambiguate a little.
It's got a pew.
Pew. Yeah, you got a pew. Elohim City had only one telephone that was shared by the entire community. Residents there remembered that on April 5th, 1995, 2 weeks before the bombing, McVeigh called looking for Strassmeyer. McVeigh, Strassmeyer, the FBI and prosecutors maintained that the two met once at a Tulsa gun show 2 years earlier, in April 1993, at which point Strassmeyer invited McVeigh, who introduced himself as Tim Tuttle, to the community. Tim Tuttle is not turtly enough.
What I like is that there's only one phone, and it's definitely not bugged.
Yeah, there's only exactly. There's only one
phone in 100% not space, bugged. The not bugged phone.
Yes.
We even have a little sign that says "Do not bug."
Then on April 17th and again on April 18th, McVeigh called Cause, the racist legal organization that represented Strassmeyer. Is it a legal organ? I'm not familiar with Cause, but I'm wondering if it's a legal organization full of racist lawyers and legal advisors, or is it just that's their client base?
Yes.
I wonder if they still exist. It's maybe a little column A. Yeah, it doesn't have to be one or the other. Although an FBI memo dated April 20th, 1995, the day after the bombing, stated it is suspected that members of Elohim City are involved in the bombing, either directly or indirectly through conspiracy, no real investigation into these links was conducted. Strassmeyer was questioned only by telephone. You didn't even have to call him to question him by telephone. You could just listen to his calls. And only after he had been allowed to leave the country and return to Germany. Nevertheless, suspicions about him persisted. According to Roger Charles, a number of strange details and circumstances surrounded his life. Strongly suggests that Strassmeyer was not the radical right-winger he appeared to be, and might even have been a government agent of some sort, spying on extremists in the United States.
Wait, what do you mean, nevertheless? Everything about that sounds shady as hell.
Yeah, like the fact that he was allowed to leave and the fact that he moved to a place where it's illegal to be a racist.
Also, I'll leave this with my secretary and I will call you at the earliest convenience.
Exactly. Over the years, Strassmeyer spoke to a handful of journalists. In 1997, while denying his involvement in the bombing, he told Evans Pritchard that the bombing was a sting operation permeated by undercover agents and informants that acquired momentum of its own, Strassmeyer elaborated. That would be the guilty agent storyline.
Yes. So for those of you first-time listeners out there, there are 4 different competing theories that Painting sort of lays out, and we'll go over them in greater detail as they come up.
Yes, but it's basically lone wolf. Timothy McVeigh acted alone. That is the government statement. Pack of wolves, which is there were other equal co-conspirators. Guilty agent, and then what is the last one?
Was it unsuspecting agent?
Oh yeah. Basically, guilty agent means that he did it on behalf of some sort of government body, and then the other one is that he
didn't do it at all.
Innocent.
He's a patsy.
Seems unlikely, but let's see.
I always trust my government, actually.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say that I believe the lone wolf theory. In fact, I don't. But Timothy McVeigh was definitely involved. So the ATF, FBI, and different agencies weren't cooperating. In fact, they were working against each other. You even had a situation where one branch of the FBI was investigating and not sharing with another branch. The ATF had something going on with McVeigh. They were watching him. Of course they were. McVeigh knew he was delivering a bomb, but he had no idea what was in that truck. He just wanted to shake things up a little, make a gesture. That one of those getting to know you bombs. The bomb was never meant to explode. They were going to arrest McVeigh at the site with the bomb in hand, but he didn't come in at the right time. Maybe he changed the time. You never know with people who are so unreliable. I've heard that they were expecting the bomb to go off in the middle of the night between 2 and 3 in the morning. The truck had a transmitter, so they could track it with radio receiving device. I don't know how they could have lost contact. I think there was misinformation that the operation had been canceled. When asked if he thought the agents and informants would reveal themselves, Strassmeyer responded, "How can he? What happens if it was a sting operation from the very beginning? What happens if it comes out that the plant was a provocateur? What if he talked and manipulated the others into it? What then? The country couldn't handle it. The relatives of the victims are going to go crazy. And he's going to be responsible for the murder of 168 people? Of course the informant can't come forward. He's scared shitless right now." The dissident truth seekers also discovered connections between McVeigh and a group of Elohim City associates who called themselves the Aryan Republican Army, ARA, and dubbed the press the Midwest Bank Robbers. Considered to be one of the most criminally competent paramilitary gangs in American history. Between 1993 and 1995, the ARA robbed I don't know why I added 100 there. Robbed 22 banks, netting over $250,000 in proceeds. That does not seem like a lot to me.
No.
Actually.
Well, I mean, in today's dollars, that's not a lot at all.
I mean, okay. So inflation adjusted, that's probably still
it's actually
not
$6 billion.
It's $6 billion, yeah.
Adjusted for inflation.
Yeah. Wisely invested.
You see, they robbed the bank and then put the money back in the bank.
Yeah, and then they went to a different bank and deposited it, and then it was on deposit, so they stole the cash again and then deposited it at another bank, and it's all been in a high-yield mutual fund. The ultimate, although it did get wiped out in the dot-com bubble, so it's still just $250,000.
They had to keep robbing banks because they kept investing in...
And it's gone. Yeah, they were just making withdrawals. The ultimate goal of the ARA's bank robberies was to fund and incite a race war, spark a revolution, and establish an all-white homeland. When the ARA was apprehended, a mountain of...
For the low price of $250,000.
You guys have got to rob a lot of banks. Yeah. I don't know what they're...
So wait, hold on. They stole about $1,000 per bank.
No, they robbed 22 banks.
Yeah, but
they robbed about $10,000.
Sorry, I was never good at math. Okay, so $10,000 per bank. That seems low.
It seems low. It seems really low. It seems like not even the down payment on a shitty house. But there we are. When the ARA was apprehended, a mountain of bomb-making materials were found in their safe house. McVeigh, that doesn't sound very safe. McVeigh denied any association, but his movements through the country in the years leading to the bombing often closely overlapped with those of the ARA. And in the years leading up to the bombing, he'd written his sister telling her that he was involved in a group of bank robbers. Although a few of the bank robbers would allude to ARA participation in the bombing plot, and there was physical and circumstantial evidence linking certain members of the ARA with the bombing, the FBI improperly destroyed some of it, failed to look closely at the bank robbers' alibis on April 19th, 1995, and ultimately shut down their investigation into the connections for some reason.
Oopsie doopsie.
Wilburn Sanders wrote that as the dissidents' investigation advanced, it was becoming clear that there was much we didn't know, and the people who were supposed to be on our side might be harboring some unthinkable secrets. Still, the incestuous sharing of information between the grand jury investigators, Jones' team, dissidents, and investigative journalists continued to yield results. Perhaps the most startling were revelations about Carol Howe, a paid informant for the ATF and FBI, who from June 1994 until March 1995 had infiltrated Elohim City, the ARA, and other groups in an ATF investigation deemed investigation significant / sensitive, meaning it had potential national security implications. Howe, who became deeply embedded within the community of extremists, filed over 70 reports with the ATF handlers and on numerous occasions warned them about the impending attack on April 19th, the anniversary of the fire at Waco. And named the fire at Waco is a really low-key way to say that. And named Andreas Strassmeyer and some of the ARA bank robbers, among others, as conspirators. I'm just saying, she filed 70 reports. This lady was getting piped down hard at Elohim City. This honeypot was completely...
Not a lot of honey left in the pot.
Not a lot of honey left in there after filing 70 reports. She was deeply in bed.
She was embedded.
Yes. In one report submitted prior to the OKC bombing, Howe specifically named the Murrah Federal Building as one of the 3 possible targets for a bombing being considered by the conspirators, and reported she had, on 3 occasions, accompanied them to scout out the Murrah. She passed all of the 17 polygraph tests the ATF had given her to substantiate her information. Immediately after the bombing, Howe reported to the ATF and FBI that she had seen McVeigh at Elohim City on more than one occasion.
I just
Googled
Carol Howe, and oof.
Is she a handsome woman?
She is an old chunk of coal, as they say. A real battle axe.
I mean, what did she look like in 1994?
Yeah, in 1994, she looked like a reverse panda.
What do you mean?
Just a lot.
Oh, she just had a lot. Look, man.
It looks like every time that somebody at Elohim City told her something, she'd have to be told twice. If you pick up my meaning.
She, I mean, definite honeypot vibes in the couple photos. I mean, she was obviously, but
that is. I'm gonna DM you a picture real quick.
Just like you're gonna DM me the modern day picture or
no.
the Elohim City snapshot.
Just a little insider baseball.
Oh wow! She was
branded.
She got a swastika tattoo on the top of her upper left arm, which shows real dedication to the honeypotting. Honestly, maybe she just had a bad breakup and was,
Taylor Swift writes a song, she sells out an entire cell of dissidents and bad people. These are very bad people. We have to disavow.
How dare they try to live among their own
with one telephone?
With one telephone. Corroborating her claims were a number of other undercover informants placed within Elohim City by federal agencies and watchdog groups, including the Southern Poverty Law Center, of course, who independently said they saw McVeigh there on over a dozen occasions. In fact, the dissidents' unholy alliance led to revelations about the prevalence of federal informants embedded within or very near to the bombing plot, of whom Howe was only one. Evans Pritchard wrote, "The intrigue had become so twisted with undercover informants from different agencies tripping over each other that it is almost impossible to disentangle. Thus was the story of the closely watched wolves born."
Yes, that was one of them. As we said, there's a few different conspiracies or conspiracy theories that Painting comes up with.
Well, they're narratives, potential.
Right, narratives, yeah.
How many? What was the ratio? It was a real Pareto ratio. In Elohim City, it was 80% informants. There's like one guy.
Are you telling me that 13% of the population did 50% of the informing?
I'm telling you that 80% of the population were on the FBI payroll, and there was one guy There was one guy who was a true believer who
And he
was
was just such a nice guy, and he
just
was the
such a
cook, and nobody
just the
wanted to
cook.
rat him out.
Yep. He only cooked white things, only white potatoes and
And chicken.
milky pie and I don't know, milk steak.
Milk steak, yes.
In 1996, based on information developed by the committee and its allies, 475 survivors and victims' family members began filing what would amount to several civil wrongful death lawsuits, as well as other legal actions initiated against government agencies, including the ATF and FBI. The plaintiffs charged that those named in the suits had failed to act on the warnings of informants and argued that the bombing had occurred amidst a sting operation, and thus the government agencies involved were partially culpable for the deaths that occurred. In its confusion, it harmed itself, a mainstay within all later closely watched Wolves stories. The courts dismissed the lawsuits. The Jones team and key investigators spoke with numerous individuals who said the FBI interviewed them regarding McVeigh, his associates, and possible co-conspirators, but that reports documenting these interviews had not been among the discovery information furnished by the FBI. Further, a growing number of people with crucial information about the bombing plot said that the FBI expressly instructed them not to speak to the defense team, harass them, and ordered them to destroy any notes they had taken about what they knew or witnessed.
So an important thing that we're going to keep seeing over and over again is that the FBI wanted to point to McVeigh. McVeigh wanted the FBI to point to himself. Everybody had an interest in making sure that McVeigh was the only person to go down for this and that the narrative stayed intact.
Yeah, exactly. And that people just put it to bed and considered it solved and never worried their pretty little heads about it again.
They did the Scooby-Doo reveal, and nobody cared that somebody was still haunting the amusement park.
Right. Still, others reported that they had been harassed and ridiculed or subjected to other FBI methods meant to prevent them from coming forward with information. Many were scared for their jobs and reputations. Charles Key recounted. All right, here's an explanation of the FBI doing this. The FBI didn't want to pay severance packages for the people in the Murrah building, so they just reassigned all their shit agents. And then they were like, well, we want, Casus Belli to, get a little more, in the weeds with the right wing and, get more funding because we got to pay for all of these informants.
Would you believe that they were filming Ernest Goes to Oklahoma?
Ernest saves the Murrah building. Jim Varney knew and did nothing.
Really tarnishes his legacy in my eyes, I gotta say.
It does. Christmas was a big one. You can't really.
Once you save Christmas, you get a lot of leeway. But
you do. Vern lived in Elohim City. That's why you never saw him. All right. I did get some personal threats, but I don't. Charles Key recounted. I did get some personal threats, but I don't feel comfortable talking about that. I think the real threats were from people like the Attorney General who had the power to try and stop people from doing what they have a right to do, to investigate. That's a real threat. There were many efforts behind the scene to try and smear us in some way, an effort to do anything possible to stop and discredit us. The Assistant Attorney General was trying to control the grand jury. Robert Macy, who was tasked with presenting evidence, was trying to fight us at every step of the way. We knew the deck was stacked against us. One of the most frustrating things was the issue of prior knowledge. It was clear that there was prior knowledge. Someone knew something was in the works, and when we asked questions about this, we were attacked. We had information from a Senate staffer. I interviewed him, and he claimed that the Justice Department was involved in a sting operation. It was never meant to get out of hand or develop to the point it did. The sting went down the wrong path. They covered it up, he said, because the operation went bad. One of the most frustrating things was that we were accused of saying the government blew the building up, which I did not say and do not believe that. There was a difference between a sting operation that has gone wrong and thinking the government did it. The question is, how much prior knowledge did they have? I disagree a lot with Charles Key. However,
yeah, we'll call this the sensible centrist take.
The sensible centrist take is that it's the moderate position on
Clearly more was known than was revealed. But good old James Lindsay would say, yeah, but I mean, the government wouldn't do that.
Why would you think that they would? Why would they do that? It was their building. They blow up their
You
own
wouldn't
things.
key your car.
You wouldn't key your car. You wouldn't key your fleet of vehicles. You wouldn't blow up your employees' children.
You wouldn't download a car, would you?
I would download a car. Roger Charles later wrote that the prosecution was worried about the large number of witnesses who recalled seeing McVeigh with others, and so, with the help of a handful of trusted FBI agents, they set about making the problems go away. They interviewed and re-interviewed witnesses, looking for weaknesses in their stories or ways to get them to change their minds. Included were lead FBI agent Scott Mendeloff and John Hursley's extensive efforts to neutralize Elliott's employees, convince him that John Doe 2 was a phantom, and thereby prevent the spectral conspirator from appearing at trials. In fact, Hursley was the prosecution's go-to person to resolve many of the holes in the case. Lead prosecutor Larry Mackey later acknowledged that Hursley regularly hammered witnesses who might aid the defense team's cases. Further, another lead FBI agent in the case, Danny Deffenbaugh, disclosed that in his opinion, Hursley commonly distorted evidence, lied about his investigation or lack thereof, and often acted outside of his authority. We had to watch over John. He'd go around trying to stop viable investigations, especially if they involved other people in the conspiracy. Every time we caught him, I had to bring him in the woodshed to paddle him, and then he'd go right back at it.
I wonder how many people found horse heads in their beds.
I wonder.
I don't even have a horse.
I wonder what he means by bring him in the woodshed to paddle him. I mean, I realize that was not a literal punishment, probably, but
we can't discount that it might have been.
We can't discount that it may have been a literal woodshed,
actual woodshed
in
with
Quantico.
Real paddling.
Yeah, in Quantico, made out of old knotty pine. Yeah. Thus, nearly a year after they had submitted their first request, Jones informed Mosh that the government had not complied with Mosh's earlier order to turn over discovery material, that the defense team continued to learn of efforts by the government to conceal and destroy exculpatory evidence and to obstruct the defense investigation of the facts of the case. And it's an awkward phrasing. He compared the case and the struggle to obtain the information to Alice in Wonderland, where nothing is as it seems and nobody means exactly what they say. Jones submitted a 400-page list of still missing information, including that uncovered by the dissidents and key investigators, as well as still classified reports, saying that the list represented only the tip of the iceberg, and accurately foretold that unless the situation was rectified, much exculpatory evidence will never be known to the defense.
Your Honor, you don't understand. It makes us look really, really bad.
Yeah. Prosecutors insisted that they had already turned over all the materials, had even exceeded their discovery obligations, and accused the defense of going on a fishing expedition. Much to McVeigh's displeasure, an undeterred Jones filed a motion with the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, arguing that there was a high probability that Strassmeyer and other individuals at Elohim City were part of the bombing conspiracy, but that the government had engaged in a willful and knowing cover-up of information supplied by its informant, Carol Howe. Ultimately, though, Mosh denied Jones's pleas to compel the prosecution to comply with discovery rules, and Mosh's earlier order that they do so, ruling that Howe's testimony was irrelevant, and that even if the defense had all the government's information related to Elohim City, other suspected conspirators and everything else it sought, he would deem it inadmissible at the trial. Only after the criminal trial concluded did the Jones team learn the extent to which the FBI failed to turn over discoverable exculpatory materials. Further revelations of withheld information continue to this day, as explained in the final chapter.
And I mean, there's enough for a second book, apparently.
Yeah.
I don't know when she is planning
and
to
this is a chunker, so
yeah. This is a thick boy. It's like 600 pages and then the notes.
Yep. If Jones or McVeigh's media strategies had in any way softened the public perception of McVeigh, such progress was lost when, on March 1st, 1997, just weeks before his trial began, the Dallas Morning News ran yet another front-page leaked confession story, which was then picked up by several other major news media outlets, whose front-page exclusives included yet more leaked material. McVeigh blamed Jones for the breach, and Jones, after alternately blaming various members of the defense team, settled on publicly pointing a finger at Richard Reyna, the defense investigator closest to McVeigh. Reyna, in turn, denied the accusation and went on to publicly blame Jones for the leaks. No matter who had leaked this time, other members of the Jones team felt that the Dallas Morning News article was simply the unavoidable culmination of Jones's unwise relationship with the media that had plagued their efforts since the get-go.
Have you ever seen Suits?
I have not.
Oh, it's a decent show with Meghan Markle in it in an unspectacular role. But I only bring it up because this would be a fun season of Suits.
Just Jones keeps fucking up?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Legal experts opined that the continuous Jones team leaks had done more damage to McVeigh than the government's own case against him. Jones team attorney Coyne later wrote that after the article, our Hindenburg of hope had vaporized, and Jones's media campaign imploded with a vengeance. In my view, the good ship McVeigh had run ashore on the shoals of its captain's ego. Jones had been hoisted by his own petard. The conflict had ensued, said Coyne. Made the shootout at the OK Corral look like a simple misunderstanding. This is a lot of folksy explanations.
Let's just say that our Hindenburg of hope had vaporized.
Our Hindenburg of hope had gone up in flames.
Mr. Jones was hoisted by his own petard.
Hoisted by his own petard. You never want to hoist a man by his own petard.
That made that old shootout at the OK Corral look like a misunderstanding.
When McVeigh found out about the Morning News leak, he had nothing short of a conniption fit. Defense attorney
conniption fits.
Tretico said, the media leaks sent Tim over the top, and quite frankly, I don't blame him. It was devastating to the defense right before the trial. McVeigh then attempted to have Jones removed from the case based on such mismanagement, but was unsuccessful due largely to Jones's own thwarting of McVeigh's efforts. When he failed to get Jones fired, McVeigh threatened to plead guilty. In response to the threat, Jones wrote McVeigh a letter reminding him that many members of the defense team felt McVeigh's version of the story, while possible, was neither probable nor likely, and warned that if McVeigh attempted to plead guilty, Jones would inform Judge Mosh that McVeigh was simply attempting to take the fall for other conspirators. In another letter, referring to McVeigh's many references to his personal code of honor, Jones chided McVeigh. If by code of honor you mean we are to protect other murdering bastards, that is not something we have any obligation to do. Certainly no one is protecting you. You have been thrown to the wolves.
You've been thrown to the wolves, boy.
Yeah, not really like a great thing to hear from your lead defense attorney.
We don't have anything.
No one is here to protect you.
Johnny
Not even
Cochran
me.
is working a different case.
Johnny Cochran is working for O.J. Simpson. Yeah. And he can form rhymes.
All I got is my folks' accent.
All I got.
I'm just a simple country lawyer.
All I've got is these suspenders in my quado.
In my briefcase, I don't even have anything.
I have a sandwich from last week that has gone rancid.
And some bomb-making material, just in case.
Just in case. In order for you to play a useful role in your own defense, you need to eliminate the fiction that you are some self-contained individual fully capable of controlling your own destiny and actions. It has come time at last to grow up and recognize fully what is at stake here. We are trying to save your ass. Your version of events places 99% of the responsibility for the bombing of the AP Murrah Building upon yourself. You claim to have conceived of the project, organized it, financed it, thought it through, and then carried it out. In your discussions with us, nothing is left to chance and everything was perfectly executed, including having been intentionally apprehended afterwards. The details you offer to support this story simply appear to be irreconcilable with the facts and simply cannot be reconciled with the known physical evidence and eyewitnesses unless we are willing to believe that not just simply one or two, but dozens of individuals are honestly mistaken. What you are doing is protecting fellow conspirators. You simply have not told us the truth. I think it is entirely possible, perhaps even probable, that much of what you have told us is, in fact, the truth. But the part that is not the truth may be the most critical, i.e., the role of others. It is the responsibility of attorneys to investigate not only the facts, but to investigate beyond what the client has said or represented. And nothing you can say or do can distract us from that duty. You can write to whomever you wish complaining about me, though it is certainly ill-advised.
He basically said there's no way in hell anyone would believe that you did this by yourself.
Yeah.
Meanwhile,
Well, also to be clear, like there are a shitload of people who saw a John Doe number 2 of some description. Like it's not just you know, it's not just like one or two people. So
I think more people saw John Doe number 2 than they did McVeigh.
yeah. Jones warned that if he did not give up his fictions, McVeigh would eventually break down physically, emotionally, and mentally, and concluded the letter by outlining his predictions about the future of McVeigh's trial and legacy, which Jones said were likely no matter what McVeigh or his legal team did or did not do. The reality is, of course, that the odds are you will be found condemned not only by the verdict of the jury, but by the verdict of the American people, history, your family, and that you will be executed and put to death, not with honor, but because you will be perceived as a mass murderer, a man who committed a crime greater than Lee Harvey Oswald, John Wilkes Booth, or Ted Bundy. Not only will you die, but many of the principles you believe in will, at least temporarily, be rejected by the American people, and you will be seen as a fanatical, maladjusted misfit who brought untold suffering to thousands of innocent people in your misguided attempt to right an imaginary wrong by resorting to revolutionary terror. You will be equated in the public's mind not with Patrick Henry, but with Adolf
That guy.
Hitler. I
I
was
award
thinking,
you no points, and
I
may
was,
God have mercy on
I
your
was
soul.
thinking about saying Austrian painter, but it's fine, whatever. That's the quote. The trial and tribulations of Timothy McVeigh. So, yeah. So what we have here is there are a lot of people investigating this contemporaneously, and the FBI is not playing along. The FBI is concealing a vast quantity of information, more even than they're really putting out there. And so it's kind of why you need the book, right? The what do you got, Hudson?
No,
There was a thought there, and it's gone now.
that's all right. My favorite part of this is the fight is now not that we're gonna get you like, not that it's an innocent man fighting for his life, but rather we're going to either we're gonna make you look less guilty than you want to.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the other thing is that McVeigh really wants to take all of the credit / blame, which means he had some motivation that is non-obvious, right?
If you don't comply with us, we're gonna stop bringing female reporters around.
For you to add to your invisible harem.
Yes,
Yeah.
and you're not gonna be able to sexually harass them anymore, Tim.
Timmy, old Timmy. All right. In her 2012 book, Killing McVeigh, Jody Madeira illustrates how McVeigh's trial was the site of narrative construction and negotiation for victim survivors the state, and the larger public, which at its conclusion would offer a solidified, officially sanctioned, and publicly accepted collective version of history. Similar to the contention between McVeigh and Jones, as well as that between Jones, the dissident, and the government, the trial of Timothy McVeigh represented a struggle of who exactly could recount the past. Like the key grand jury, McVeigh's trial was an institutional ceremony to resolve lingering ambiguity and contested truths about the bombing, not the least of which concerned John Doe too. Perhaps the same thing could be said of any trial.
I like the idea of killing McVeigh. Like, that's going to be Bill O'Reilly's next series of books.
Oh my God. Yeah, it's straight to the bargain, Ben.
Yeah, in the no spin zone, we're going to figure out who blew up the Alfred P. Murrah building.
Yep. Andy the German. Strassner. It was MK Ultra. By the time jury selection began for the trial of the United States versus Timothy McVeigh on March 31st, 1997, the government had eliminated John Doe number 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, etc., as a factor in the case. Dismissing him/them. Wait a minute. We know John Doe's pronouns. He was a non-binary assigned male at birth. He's a he/them.
Boo. Bad joke.
Oh, come on.
As audience, feel free to boo Cap in the chat.
Oh yeah. All two of our live listeners.
Thank you. We have 9, sir.
Was an institute. Let me see. I lost my place. Product of witnesses' confusion and unconscious transference. The week before, the Washington Post observed that in a case where each hard fact is surrounded by theory, speculation, or spin, the shadowy John Doe 2 would, like Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster, remain eternally at large. The one who got away, the mystery man at the center of countless conspiracy theories. It's possible that he never lived. It's likely that he'll never die. Huh.
Kind of reminds me of the Swedish German.
Just kind of Judge Holden. Yeah. He says that he will never die. He had become a legend delegated to the realm of myth.
He says he will never die.
Yes. Where truth is not only impossible to ascertain, it's almost irrelevant. Yes, the evening yellowness of the truck.
The evening yellowness of the Ryder truck.
Yes. Still, despite the assurance of prosecutors that the FBI had followed every possible lead in an intensive effort to identify and bring justice to everyone involved, for many, including the dissidents and a significant portion of the American public, doubts persisted. A 1997 Times CNN poll found 77% of Americans believe the FBI had not yet identified or captured all bombing conspirators, and a Gallup poll reported similar results, as well as another belief held by a considerable percentage of Americans that the federal government itself was involved in the bombing. Some chalked up the persistent belief in John Doe 2 to an inability for people to accept that one man, McVeigh, with a little but not much help from his friends, Nichols and Fortier, could commit such an atrocity. Others blamed increasing public cynicism and distrust in the government that had become common after the JFK assassination. Boy, that aged well. Vietnam, Watergate, and Iran-Contra. Public confidence in the criminal justice system and law enforcement agencies generally, and the FBI especially, had sharply declined in the wake of Ruby Ridge, Waco, and the first World Trade Center bombing, OKC and Atlanta Olympic bombings, and a recent FBI crime lab scandal.
Oh, and we'll get into that.
Yeah.
Again, this book leaves no stone unturned. I do like the idea of McVeigh, Fortier, and Nichols doing a sort of Three Stooges routine.
I would think it was.
I'll drive the Ryder truck. No, I'll drive the Ryder.
No, I'll drive. Yeah. They're all in the front trying to like get the wheel. One of them sits on the thing that sets the bomb off. They all look at each other, try to get out. Yeah. Yeah. At stake in the trial of Timothy McVeigh was the public's trust and confidence in longstanding government institutions, and McVeigh's guilty verdict could potentially act as a powerful remedy for the crisis of legitimacy caused by the FBI's ongoing foul-ups, mishaps, and cover-ups. It's almost like that would be some kind of incentive.
Every single time.
Oklahoma Governor Frank Keating, a former FBI agent and staunch opponent of both the key grand jury theories about John Doe number 2, confidently told reporters, "We believe the system should and will work, and those responsible for the horrific act will never walk the face of this earth again." For him, the willingness of, because they were blown up in the bombing, willingness of Americans to believe that our free institutions can commonly be corrupted to dark and evil purposes was a result of watching too many Oliver Stone movies. What we see on the movie screens these days demonizes government agencies and public officials. Free institutions cannot survive this kind of cynicism. In fact, Keating continued, the bombing itself was a result of just such paranoia. Oliver Stone, according to this guy, is responsible for the Oklahoma City bombing, but he doesn't want to investigate John Doe number 2.
I would definitely watch the Oliver Stone OKC film.
You mean CCTV footage?
Well, no, those parts were erased.
Oliver
It's
Stone
called
was
John Doe number 3.
right.
I haven't seen the first 2.
It turns out it doesn't matter if you have CCTV footage of something, because what happens is you trace the January 6th pipe bomb guy back to where he came from, which was an FBI building. So and then no one gets prosecuted.
Exactly.
So,
It's just one of them oopsies. He had to use the bathroom. Shut up.
one of them oopsies. Yeah, no, they don't lock the doors because they want the public to be able to use the bathroom. It's DEI. It's fine. It's fine. It's public service. What you don't want your tax dollars to go to a public bathroom? Guilty verdicts in criminal trials.
Better use of my tax dollars.
Right. I can't think of a better one, actually. Guilty verdicts in criminal trials help exercise social demons and retroactively or preemptively legitimize institutional responses to it. The bombing had unleashed an abundance of previously dormant or clandestine threats, including racists, militia, gun nuts, and conspiracy theorists who posed a danger to peace-loving Americans, and who had quickly come to represent an emergent homegrown domestic terrorist specter. Since the time of his arrest, media coverage had linked McVeigh to militias, conspiracy theorists, and a number of others, said to be allied with a loose network of autonomous anti-government groups who had inhabited the semi-underground world of gun shows and remote compounds. These apocalyptic millennialists reportedly reportedly ranted and raved about black helicopters, government concentration camps for the politically incorrect, implantable microchips, and the New World Order, spaceships, and sometimes the Zionist-controlled media. Zom? Many feared the viral spread of their dangerous ideas. Experts warned journalists that America's extremists, defined as militia members and conspiracy theorists of all stripes, would be watching the trial closely for details that supported their crazy theories, anti-government or otherwise. Information that would then absolutely flood that subculture and potentially spark another McVeigh. On the other hand, if McVeigh was found guilty, the government could send a clear message to racist, terrorist, militia members, and other anti-government zealots that their beliefs had no place in society, and demonstrate to the rest of the world that the acts of terrorism on American soil would not be tolerated. Yes.
Unless you're Arab.
Unless you're Arab or a Texan. Or Israeli. Opening arguments commenced on April 24th. It was the most covered criminal trial in the 20th century and an absolute circus. For 9 weeks, the most covered criminal trial in the 20th century.
Literally OJ was happening at the same time.
I'm pretty sure OJ was a bigger deal.
They invented court TV just for OJ.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure OJ was the most covered trial.
Fact checked, Wendy.
Live fact checking of a book that was published years ago. Opening argument. Yeah. For 9 weeks, more than 2,000 media representatives from every major outlet swarmed Denver and swamped the airwaves with round-the-clock coverage, in-studio recaps of the previous 2 years, on-location commentary, up-to-the-minute updates, legal analysis, and speculations about the outcome. In an attempt to avoid the frenzied circus atmosphere that had plagued the O.J. Simpson trial,
No, there you
Judge
go.
Mosh banned cameras from filming inside the courtroom and relegated journalists to an area outside of the courthouse known as the bullpen. Still, each day, the courtroom quickly filled beyond its maximum capacity. Security measures in and around the courtroom were intense.
I just like to think that one of the court reporters gets tired, so the judge goes is "Get me the lefty," and does one of the symbols for the bullpen. I don't know. It's October. Playoff baseball's on.
I don't know the symbol for the bullpen.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, sorry.
I want to call you an
Sorry.
F slur, but we're on YouTube.
Well, it is America's pastime, and I have only ever watched baseball when roaring drunk. So, however, it is a great way to day drink outside. I will say that.
Especially at a kid's little league game.
Especially at a kid's little league game. During the trial, federal prosecutors told the lone wolf story with a little help from his friend Nichols. They emphasized McVeigh's anti-government views and asserted that while Nichols had offered minimal assistance by gathering materials and building the bomb, two pretty important things. I don't know if that's minimal assistance. You built the bomb. McVeigh alone
I drove him to Lowe's and helped him get some fertilizer.
Yeah. But planned and carried out the bombing by driving alone to OKC and detonating the truck bomb. According to prosecutors, while it was true that both Nichols and Fortier had agreed to help McVeigh, they did so only because he had intimidated and threatened them until both, to differing extents, backed out, leaving McVeigh to execute the final stages of his plan by himself. "Please, Tim," said Fortier, "stop fucking my wife. I'll do anything."
Anything?
Anything?
You still have your contractor's card with Lowe's that get you 10% off purchases for anything except for what is it? Appliances?
Bomb making materials. Prosecutors attributed McVeigh's motive to bomb the Murrah building as hatred of the government and rage about retire all government employees about the 80 Branch Davidians killed at Waco. Jones' team attorney Randy Coyne observed, as many others would, the efficiency and brevity of the prosecution's case. The government kept their case simple, lean, and mean. They got in and got out, and didn't seem to prove everything, and didn't present a complete story. They certainly weren't interested in cluttering it up with alternate theories, and Tim was not interested in sharing responsibility if that might mean reducing his culpability.
Just like Fortier wasn't interested in sharing his wife.
So true. Jones touched upon aspects of McVeigh's desired necessity defense, which revolved around the argument that the actions at Waco had required him to bomb the Murrah building, but mainly attempted to poke holes in the prosecution's case and alluded that McVeigh had simply been a designated patsy within a larger conspiracy. Judge Mosh, however, ruled that much of the eyewitness testimony and physical evidence, or lack thereof, that Jones wanted to use was inadmissible, thereby severely hampering his ability to raise questions in the mind of jurors about the others unknown. Huh. So weird that if you can't use evidence, yeah.
That's America, baby.
Can you imagine if the necessity defense had actually worked out and ended up being a landmark case?
I had to do it, Your Honor.
That would be wild. I mean, you can see why that wouldn't work out, right? The system could never allow that defense to be a victorious.
Could you imagine they sneak one dude on the jury who just does jury nullification for that?
Oh my fucking god! One guy, one jury nullification, dude.
Case was like both Jones and the prosecutors like, all right, we got to make sure that not one McVeigh looking guy can be on this jury.
There were probably more FBI agents on that jury than there were in Elohim City. Among the absent witnesses whose testimony was ruled inadmissible were those who saw McVeigh at Elliott's Dreamland. at Elliott's, Dreamland, Geary Lake, where the bomb was allegedly built, and Oklahoma City, all of whom saw him with other individuals, collectively referred to as John Doe 2. Prosecutors dismissed as confused the statements of the many Dreamland witnesses who saw not only another unidentified male with McVeigh, as well as another Ryder truck prior to the Elliott's rental. Despite
And
numerous...
here for a report is our on-the-scene reporter, Linda Moulton Howe. It's a Dreamland joke.
Oh, got it. Is that a show?
No, it's Art Bell's Sunday show, where it was literally just him talking to Linda Howe. It was less caller driven and more interview style. Dreamland was a great show.
I only ever listened to Coast to Coast.
Well, no, it was on Coast to Coast. It was just the Sunday show.
Oh,
so if you listen to Coast, some of the episodes are called Dreamland.
Oh, interesting. I didn't realize that. I was, and I also admit that I was mostly a '90s kid for the Art Bell stuff. But,
I mean, they have. I just listened to the podcast version now. They have all of his episodes. Well, not all of them, but a lot of them on podcast platforms.
Still got to train Art Bell LM.
Yeah. Funny story about that. The guy who I know who has the technology to do that says that Art Bell's voice is too generic, and it doesn't. The software doesn't pick it up well enough.
That's so weird.
I know.
All right. Let's see. Despite numerous eyewitness statements and other evidence of the contrary, prosecutors emphasized that only one truck was used in the bombing plot and told jurors that there was no indication that McVeigh rented a second truck. Jones was unable to introduce evidence showing otherwise. McVeigh, of course, could not have been more pleased by Judge Mosh's rulings and told his attorney so, chiding that for the past 18 months they had ignored his request that they stop pursuing others unknown and John Doe's. He did not take the stand in his own defense. While their testimony was ruled inadmissible, Jones was able to discuss the testimony given to the FBI by several eyewitnesses who had reported seeing McVeigh and another person in the days leading up to the bombing, and with him in the Ryder the morning of April 19th. When taken together, he argued, they provide a picture of a dramatically different than the one that the government will present. Jones remarked that it defied logic to think that McVeigh, whom the government said had carefully plotted this act of terror for 2 years, would register at the Dreamland Motel under his own name, but use an alias to rent the Ryder from Elliott's, only miles away. He then called attention to the fact that several people had access to McVeigh's phone card, and therefore it was impossible to prove who exactly made many of the incriminating calls, such as those placed to Elliott's when the Ryder was reserved. Although
there was an episode of The Simpsons where Bart kidnaps himself and then incriminates Milhouse's dad as the kidnapper, and everybody goes along with it because it makes Wiggum look like a hero. Bart doesn't get in trouble, and Milhouse's dad actually gets a lot of female attention for being a criminal.
Nice.
So it turns into this giant conspiracy that Lisa just has to go and ruin because she's Lisa. And that I don't know why I brought that up. Has nothing to do with what we're talking about right now.
But for some reason, the neurons were activated.
Yeah, I think in Simpsons quotes.
Is this like a later one? Like a later
Simpsons? It was like a 2000s, like not.
Oh God.
Like late 90s, early 2000s.
Okay. Where the fuck? You made me lose my place.
Wow, their testimony.
He then called attention to the fact that several people had access to... there we go. Although there were up to 25 surveillance cameras positioned in and around the Murrah building on April 19th, the FBI never produced them during discovery, nor did they enter them as evidence at the criminal trials. The whereabouts of footage from all of the 25 known surveillance cameras remained unknown, and Mosh did not compel the FBI to produce them. Amazingly, as none of the witnesses who saw McVeigh on the day leading up to the bombing and on the morning of April 19th testified, assumedly because they all saw him with other people, and since the surveillance tapes from the Murrah never surfaced, and while nobody argued otherwise, prosecutors never even established McVeigh's presence in OKC on the morning of the 19th.
We can't even place him there. Wow.
Seems suspicious. Seems like one of the things you would need to do. Roger Charles opined that despite the FBI's protestations about leaving no stone unturned, by June 1995, only weeks into the investigation, the government had settled on the case they planned to present, which for him was notable for what it left out, was as notable for what it left out as it was for the oddly truncated version it presented as the whole story.
A lot
Jones
of
remarked,
moss growing on some of those stones.
right. Let's see. The whole story, Jones remarked, that the factual part of the government's case was pared down to a minimum, and it went fast, like a film that's been edited to a jump cut paste, presumably so that no one would notice the gaps and inconsistencies. Sorry.
You know,
It was
kind of like Taken 3, where what's his face? Who's the guy in Taken?
Taken, Liam Neeson.
Yeah, where Liam Neeson doesn't actually jump over that fence, but they do like something absurd, like 20 cuts to make it look like he jumped over a fence in one scene.
I have not seen any of the Taken movies, but I assume that they all are basically the same.
The first one is good. The next two are not.
Okay. You weren't taken with them?
I was untaken, actually.
Yes. You were left behind, the opposite movie. Let's see. It was daring. It was high risk. Who would have ever guessed that a case already highly circumstantial, in which the federal government was asking for the death penalty, would leave the jury without a single witness to Tim McVeigh's whereabouts from April 17th to April 19th? Physical evidence was introduced during the trial was scarce and dubious. Criminologist and former Jones team consultant Mark Ham observed that the government's lone wolf theory failed to explain how the bomb was built, transported to Oklahoma City, and discharged. A DOJ Inspector General's inspection and audit report issues months earlier had strongly criticized the FBI's crime lab for mishandling evidence in several high-profile cases, including but not limited to the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, an assassination attempt on George H.W. Bush that same year, the 1995 investigation of Unabomber Ted Kaczynski, and the Oklahoma City bombing. The IG initiated its investigation after the supervisory special agent in the FBI crime lab, Frederick Whitehurst, PhD, considered the FBI's most highly qualified bomb residue and explosives expert, went public with allegations about the corrupt crime lab practices. The IG final report concluded, among other things, that the OKC bombing investigation was one of the most serious cases of evidence tampering that the IG had ever encountered, and that the FBI crime lab had repeatedly reached conclusions that incriminated the defendants without scientific basis.
Well, whoever needed, I've never trusted.
We have
investigated.
We have investigated ourselves and found ourselves guilty. The FBI crime lab reports for the OKC bombing case had failed to document an evidentiary chain of custody, and thus reviewers could not determine the work performed or reliability of the results of the reports in the case. Ron Woods, former defense attorney for Terry Nichols, later told me, there was evidence that there was someone else in the Dreamland Motel with McVeigh when he ordered Chinese food delivery. The government never went in and fingerprinted or dusted for the fingerprints of anybody. Jones' team attorney Christopher Tritico, who was specifically tasked with gathering and analyzing all material during the trial preparation and court arguments concerning the forensic aspects of the case, also discussed the crime lab scandal with me. What we learned about the crime lab through the IG report was that it was poorly managed. The FBI had an incentive system for the scientists there. If they testified in a case that resulted in a conviction, they got bonuses, which in our view was highly unethical. They had no scientific protocols to speak of. It was just pathetic. This was supposed to be the world's premier lab. They wanted convictions, and the FBI crime lab was suffering from the prosecutorial mentality. The judge would not allow any of that into evidence. At Elliott's body shop, where the writer had been rented, the FBI had gone and took the counter. They just unbolted it from the ground and took the whole counter and took it back to the FBI crime lab to fingerprint it, and they didn't find any prints on it. Another thing that surprised me was the Acting head of the lab at the time, Stephen Burmeister, made the decision to mix the Oklahoma City evidence with that of the Unabomber case on a plane heading to Washington. They mixed the evidence in the same plane, and I made FBI agent Burmeister admit that on the stand.
You switch the samples.
I wonder if there were any bomb making materials in the Unabomber case.
Yeah, very likely. I wonder if Timothy McVeigh owned his own little cabin in Montana.
I bet he wanted to retire there. It would have been great. I would watch the buddy comedy where
Now,
it's
if
McVeigh and Kaczynski.
If I were a serial bomber, a la Dexter, I would work for the FBI crime lab.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's like, oh, why have you got this bomb residue? Well, I work at the FBI crime lab handling bomb residue. Yeah, exactly. While Mosh did not allow Whitehurst to testify about the crime lab failures in a limited capacity during the McVeigh criminal trial, the majority of his complaints about the lab, as well as large portions of the IG's final report, which called into question the prosecution's theory about the chemical composition of the bomb, would be barred from entry as evidence. FBI agent John Hersley testified about traces of a detonation chemical called PDTN found on McVeigh's clothing at the time of his arrest. Whitehurst, however, who had conducted tests on McVeigh's clothes, said he did not find PDTN residue on either McVeigh's clothes or in his car, the same conclusion reached by the IG report. Prosecutors relied on receipts for the purchase of ammonium nitrate, said to be the main ingredient in the bomb, which had been found in Terry Nichols' possession to establish a physical connection between McVeigh and the bomb. The only evidence that suggested the bomb contained ammonium nitrate were residual crystals discovered a month after the explosion. Whitehurst, in turn, argued that the heavy rain in the preceding month would have washed the crystals away. Jones argued that if Tim McVeigh built the bomb, the FBI would have found proof of this in his fingernails, nostrils, hair, clothes, car, shoes, socks, but they didn't. In fact, beyond its ingredients, prosecutors did not bring up the actual building of the bomb at Geary Lake, and jurors never learned about the many other forensic anomalies or inexplicable contradictions, including the fact that the storage lockers the government claimed McVeigh had stored bomb components in bore no trace of explosive chemicals.
You know how in the OJ trial they got to go on little field trips to the murder scene into OJ's house?
Yeah.
They should have done that with this jury.
All
It's
the
like, okay,
jurors going to like Elohim City.
Now we're gonna go to Geary Lake. Watch your step. Don't touch any of the bombs.
Right. Yes, Stabmaster Ham. Wendy does really frame the story well. This is a tremendous piece of work. Literally not in the what a piece of work. Jones, describing the trial, wrote that the FBI had to stretch the evidence to prove that McVeigh was John Doe number one, and ultimately they could not prove McVeigh had ever even entered Elliott's Rider rental shop at all. The three most damning witnesses called by the prosecution were McVeigh's sister and confidant, Jennifer McVeigh, and his friends Michael and Lori Fortier. After being placed under extreme duress by the FBI and the urging of McVeigh himself, Jennifer reluctantly agreed to testify against her brother, and in what Stuart Wright called the cruelest of ironies, offered what he felt was perhaps the most damning of all those who took the stand. Her testimony, as well as the many letters he wrote to her in the years leading to the bombing, established his obsession with the Turner Diaries, his predilection towards right-wing ideologies, and evolving hatred for the government. It did not connect him in any material or significant way to the bombing itself.
What's the opposite of a character witness?
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's a villain witness. It's like, why, yes, my brother likes the Turner Diaries. By the way, it is not even remotely worth a read. It is not even like it's a screed. I don't know, like they didn't have the internet in the 80s and 90s or something. Like the fact that was a thing at all.
Yeah, and we'll get into later just how much he loved that book. He apparently carried a copy of it with him everywhere.
He was a big fan. Yeah. Let's see. Although at first Michael Fortier denied any knowledge of or involvement with the plot to bomb the Murrah, He eventually confessed to having had prior knowledge about McVeigh's plans, but not taking him seriously, had failed to warn authorities. In exchange for immunity for Lori, a reduced sentence for himself, and the placement of both in witness protection program after Fortier served the sentence, the Fortiers agreed to testify against both McVeigh and Terry Nichols.
Honestly,
What a
if he would have reported it to the FBI, nothing would have changed. Though it's like, oh, all they would have been able to say is he was on our radar.
Yeah, you know who else reported it to the FBI? Carol Howe.
Deep undercover.
Yeah. Yeah, he
Under
probably
the
piped her.
covers.
Like, to be clear, Timothy McVeigh during Pillow Talk told me the Turner Diaries was a great read, and also that he was going to blow up the Murrah Building in Oklahoma City on April 19th, 1995.
I thought he was using it, like BDSM.
That's just a thing he says when he comes.
Bomb disposal and sadomasochism.
Nice. Bomb delivery, you mean?
Bomb delivery, yeah, sure. Well, no, whatever.
During her testimony,
not bad off the top of my head.
Yeah, it's good. During her testimony, Lori recalled that months before the bombing, McVeigh had come to their house and had used 15 soup cans to demonstrate to her how he planned to construct the bomb. You just wasting soup like that? Man just comes into your house and wastes your soup. She also
That's
said
not the
that
worst
he had
part about him coming to the 48 house.
Nice. And wrapped the box in Christmas paper. As soon as she heard about the bombing on television, said Lori, she immediately knew Tim had done it. McVeigh said that the other attorneys on his legal team had prepared a list of 118 cross-examination questions for the 48s, but instead of asking them, Jones asked irrelevant questions like why she had so many soup cans. I did not read ahead.
How many times did you sleep with Timothy McVeigh in this 48?
Yes. Was he any good? Under oath. Is his dick bigger than mine? And rambled on aimlessly about inconsequential topics. Still, Jones is not a weaver. He's not a weaver. He's a rambler.
He doesn't know the weave.
He doesn't know the weave. He doesn't pew.
Well,
Still,
he doesn't have nicknames like Mike the Cuck or Lori the Whore.
Yes. It's not good with nicknames. They gotta pew. Still, Jones got Lori to admit that she had lied to FBI agents as well as to her parents and friends about her knowledge of the bombing plot until the government offered her husband an immunity deal. Michael Fortier told jurors that after the events at Waco in 1993, McVeigh had become very disturbed, angry, defensive, and paranoid. Then, in 1994, McVeigh wrote Fortier, informing him that he, with Nichols' assistance, was planning on taking some kind of positive offensive action intended to avenge Waco. After this point, he had begun to confide various details about his preparations to Fortier, who then agreed to help. He admitted that he had accompanied McVeigh to a rented storage space where McVeigh had stashed stolen bomb-making materials and, on one occasion, to Oklahoma City to case the Murrah Building. Under cross-examination, Fortier, like Lori, admitted to having made a number of contradictory and insensitive statements to friends, family members, and the FBI in the first few days after the bombing. For instance, in addition to insisting that he had nothing to do with the murders in OKC, Fortier had told friends and family, if they call me as a witness, I'd sit there and pick my nose and flick it at the camera. In one phone conversation, which was being monitored by the FBI, he said, I've been thinking of trying to do those talk show circuits for a long time, coming up with some asinine story and getting my friends to go in with it. He said, fabricate a story of worthy of the Inquirer and make a cool mill by selling the book or movie rights to it. Lori and Michael Fortier, said Jones, were like Tarzan and Jane. They swing from tree to tree, tying the government's case together.
It's like Bonnie and Clyde and the guy that Bonnie sleeps with. For you, dear listeners who haven't watched the first two episodes, Tim McVeigh laid a lot of pipe in his career, and one
or
of
at
them
least claimed to.
At least, yes, he is. Well, no, because Lori definitely had sex with his friend's wife.
Yeah, for sure. That was confirmed. Yeah. But he also said that he was a bit of a playboy, which, not entirely confirmed. He said he fucked most of his friends' wives, which is a fucking wild.
And yet everybody said what a good guy he was.
Yeah.
That's probably one of my favorite chapters of the book. I can't wait till we get to that.
Yeah, his cell was the real bullpen. On May 28th, 1997, the evening before closing arguments began, Jones wrote to McVeigh and told him that he was honored to have been a part of the case and that no matter what the verdict turned out to be, he wanted him to know that every individual on the defense team had been committed to providing him the best legal defense possible. He then attempted to comfort his client by telling him that through his legal team, McVeigh had achieved at least some of his original objectives for the trial. I think the message that you would want out is out. The government is in a state of confusion and embarrassment. The next day, the jury began deliberation. McVeigh said that throughout the entire trial, he had known his death sentence was inevitable and therefore didn't waste energy on nail biting over the verdict or sentence. The other members of his legal team agreed. Christopher Tritico said there was no illusion that we were going to win in this case because the evidence against McVeigh, while it was circumstantial, was strong. Roger Charles said that the arguments Jones had presented during the trial all but conceded that his client would be found guilty. On June 2nd, 1997, after almost 24 hours of deliberation, the jury found 29-year-old Timothy McVeigh guilty of all 11 counts against him, recommended prosecutors seek his execution, and the sentencing phase of his trial began. McVeigh's parents took the stand asking the court to spare their son from execution. His mother's statements brought what appeared to the porters to be a tear to her son's eyes. He is not a monster, she said, choking back her own sobs. Yes, I am pleading for my son's life. He is a human being. His father, always the quiet type, chose instead to play for jurors home videos showing McVeigh as a young, normal, all-American kid. McVeigh said he did not want his parents to have to beg for his life, as the jury had already made up its mind, and attempts to change them at this point in the game were farcical.
Unfortunately, they had to fast forward through the home video where he was pretending to be Godzilla.
Let's see here. Stabmaster Ham Gore-Vidal also got moist at the thought of Timothy McVeigh. Gore-Vidal can, I don't know. Maybe that was his thing. Maybe in the modern day, Timothy McVeigh would have been like a gay icon.
Tim McVeigh is brat.
It's God, so brat. Let's see. On June 13th, 1997, prior to receiving his sentence, McVeigh, for the first time throughout the proceedings, took the opportunity to speak in court on his own behalf, to quote the dissenting opinion of Judge Brandeis in a 1928 illegal wiretapping court case. Our government is the potent, the omnipotent teacher. For good or for ill, it teaches the whole people by its example. Then the jury sentenced Timothy McVeigh to death by lethal injection. Despite the overwhelming relief of many, not everybody felt the trial provided any real resolution. Georgetown University law professor Paul Rothstein remarked that Judge Mosh held the reins so tightly that maybe there will be some doubts throughout history as to whether there were stones left unturned. During the press conference on June 16th, Stephen Jones told reporters, there is also a considerable body of evidence that indicates that he is not guilty. Now, the jury didn't find him not guilty, but the jury didn't hear the entire evidence. McVeigh, he continued, was not evil, and if the public knew the full story as he did, they would agree.
That was his job. His job was to tell them the full story.
Well, but of course, Mosh didn't allow him to put the evidence forward, and a bunch of evidence that we see in this book, was withheld by the FBI.
Now I might be a terrible country lawyer.
Yeah. Also, Jones was an idiot. And also, resignation to his death was unusual. I feel he was convinced that he was some sort of martyr. He definitely had a motive that is not entirely understood. He really, he was not trying to avoid death. He was trying to avoid implicating anyone else for some reason. It's unclear who those other people might be. There's a lot of book left, but I think that the question of the internal life of Timothy McVeigh is always going to be a mystery. Yeah. On June 30th, 1997, Jones wrote a letter to Mickey Frazier, McVeigh's mother. I just wanted to tell you how sad I am for your family and for Tim that we did not have a better result, and express that Tim was tried and convicted in the court of public opinion even before I was appointed to defend him. He has so many good qualities, and that is why I have been careful to say in all of my interviews that he is not evil or demonic. That he has many fine and noble qualities, not the least of which is empathy for the innocent. Jones's kind words and assurances failed to quell the hate that McVeigh had developed for him. After his sentencing, McVeigh successfully this time filed a motion with the court to have Jones removed from as his lead attorney. Several other members of the Jones
A
team
little late, Tim, don't you think?
a little late. Continued to represent him throughout his appeals until his execution in June 2001. The federal trial of Terry Nichols began shortly after McVeigh's concluded. Prosecutors argued that Nichols had helped McVeigh compile components and that the two had then built the bomb together. Nobody, however, including the FBI, suspected Nichols of being JD2, nor did anybody assert that he had been in OKC the morning of the bombing. Curiously, Judge Mosh allowed Nichols' defense team to introduce some of the evidence about John Doe's not allowed at McVeigh's trial, and testimony such as Carol Howe's, which was barred during McVeigh's trial. Attorney Ron Woods explained how Nichols' attorneys were not hampered by the same evidentiary restrictions and exclusion rulings as McVeigh's, and this allowed them to present a great deal of information that Jones had hoped but was not allowed to present. At the very least, Woods said, this information sowed the seeds of reasonable doubt about the government's narrative in the mind of jurors. The jury in Nichols' case certainly had doubts. It was always our position that there was someone else with McVeigh, and we spent a lot of time presenting evidence that there was someone else with McVeigh that was not Nichols, but we never could find out who that was. The evidence from the witnesses indicated there was someone else with McVeigh when he came to rent the Ryder truck. There were witnesses who saw the Ryder truck being driven in the streets of Oklahoma City with two people in it. There were also several reports of a third person. The government had developed this information but didn't want to present it because it was inconsistent with their theory. So weird use of the word theory.
Yeah, not so much as like gravity's a theory, but more like the Earth is flat as a theory.
Right. Before dismissing the jury in Nichols' 1997 pre-sentencing hearing, U.S. District Judge Richard P. Mosh, who had also presided over McVeigh's trial, stated for the record that not all of the questions have been answered and implored the FBI to continue their investigation into other unidentified conspirators. The jury deadlocked, so Nichols was not eligible for a sentence of death. Ultimately, they found him guilty on 8 counts of involuntary manslaughter and conspiracy to use a weapon of mass destruction. And he received a sentence of 161 years in prison without the possibility of parole.
We can't kill you, but we can keep you here until you die.
Yes. On May 27, 1998, Michael Fortier accepted a reduced sentence of 12 years in prison and a fine of $75,000. After his release from prison in January 2006, he and his family were placed on the witness protection program and given new identities.
But there were only 2 people that could have possibly wanted to get revenge on them, and they were both in prison.
Huh.
Why would they
Isn't
need
that
to be
strange?
Why would they need to be protected from people who are in prison?
I'm sure that you can just like find them on FetLife. Cuck and hot wife with bomb pussy. Seek bull.
We saw you from across this Ryder truck rentals place, and we really dig your vibe.
In 1999, after the Supreme Court rejected his appeal for a new trial, McVeigh chose to end his appeals, removed Jones as his attorney, and requested the earliest date for his execution, which was then set for May 16th, 2001. However, on May 1st, 2001, after the FBI disclosed that it had withheld thousands of discovery documents from McVeigh's defense team during the 1997 trial, Attorney General John Ashcroft ordered a 30-day postponement of the
30
execution
days.
to allow, to review the documents. This, however, was not enough time for the attorneys to adequately view the materials, and they had reason to believe that the documents represented only a small portion of what had been withheld during the discovery. Nevertheless, Ashcroft insisted that none of the newly found documents created any doubt about McVeigh's guilt, and the execution would proceed. Randy Coyne said, "We were buried in FBI investigative reports known as 302s. We were given the haystacks and so set about looking for the needle. Apparently, as was revealed later, not everything that should have been turned over to us by the government was." Christopher Tritico recalled, "After the trial, I was off the case. But when the evidence came out that the government had not given us all of our evidence, I was reappointed with several other members of the original defense team and was his lawyer again until the execution. When we found out about all of the evidence, Tim said, 'Let's find out what it is at least,' and authorized us to do what we had to try to stop the execution and see the evidence. And of course, we were denied at every step. The documents we did get gave us leads we wanted to investigate. Can I say these leads would have radically changed the outcome of the trial? No, I can't say that. But those leads led us to discover that there was another 100 boxes of evidence that we never did get to see. Now, in that 100 boxes, is there something that would have changed the outcome? Who knows? And now nobody ever will." The title of a May 12, 2001 New York Post article, "Dead Man Laughing, Tim the Terrorist Sneers at Victims," quoted one man whose 27-year-old daughter had died in the bombing and who, when asked his feelings about McVeigh's impending execution, said, "He is enjoying this attention because we have created a monster." The article concluded by stating that while new evidence was coming to light in the final hours before the execution, America's most homegrown monster is laughing when people are still crying. Dead man laughing. Still, headlines like that of CBS News, which claimed evidence the FBI withheld on purpose, suggest prosecutors contradicted information FBI had on hand, kept public doubt about the case alive. Poopy. It's crazy that obviously no one was ever held accountable for having withheld all of this extremely relevant evidence in a major terrorism case, to let at least some of the people who did it walk free for some unknown reason. But yeah, no one was ever held accountable for it, even though it's acknowledged that they didn't turn over the information. Isn't that wild? I don't know. I think that's weird.
It's one of those things, you just gotta ignore it. We are running on vibes, sir.
We're a vibes. Yeah, we are now and have forever been a vibes-based economy. According to public opinion polls, by June 2001, nearly 2/3 of Americans thought other individuals beyond McVeigh and Nichols had been involved in the plot. 2 survivors of the bombing unsuccessfully petitioned the court to delay the execution for the sake of obtaining and preserving evidence of the crime. One of them, VZ Lawton, said, "I lost 58 friends in the building that day, and the bombers also attempted to murder me. I believe that is reason enough for me to pursue everyone who was involved in the bombing. I want justice, but there can be no justice without the truth." While some hope that if McVeigh was kept alive, he might someday tell the truth about the facts surrounding the bombing, the majority of those victimized believe that even if there was more to the story, McVeigh would never talk. In any event, Timothy McVeigh seemed to have nothing more to say. Having considered the possibility of filing another appeal, he instructed his attorney to drop any appeals and resigned himself to death. The Bureau of Prisons, BOP, allowed the execution to be broadcast via closed-circuit television to victims' family members. 14,000 press credentials were issued, and on the morning of June 11, 2001, scores of reporters from the media outlets and cable networks were gathered outside the Terre Haute prison. At 7:14 a.m. After receiving a series of lethal injections, 33-year-old Timothy James McVeigh was pronounced dead, becoming the first federally executed prisoner since 1963. As his final statement, he offered the words of William Ernest Henley from the 1875 poem Invictus. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeoning of chance, my head is bloody but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishment the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul.
I actually used to have that poem memorized.
Well, you can do it again.
Yeah, just for for old time's sake. All right, now we got and that's the end of the or the end of the introduction.
That's the end of the introductory chapter.
All right, so these are all of the. We're not going to go through the footnotes, folks.
Yeah, we are not going to go through the footnotes. They are excellent and well worth the read, and they're also like 20% of the book's length. But we had intended on going for 3 hours, and we're about an hour 40 into it.
Do we want to start?
Yeah, I think we should just start the next.
Yeah, we can start the narrative types.
Okay, that sounds good. So yeah, any thoughts from the audience or you, Hudson, before we dive into the next segment?
No, I mean, I would definitely, if I were listening to this for the first time, I would go back and listen to the first 2 episodes and then circle back to this before.
But don't leave the live stream.
Yeah, no, keep on keeping on.
Also, thank you. Appreciate it. All right, narrative types and recurring depictions. God gives the nuts, but he does not crack them. Franz Kafka. I don't know. That seems a little apocryphal. Seems a little. I mean, I don't know. He's German, or was he German? I want to say he was German.
Something. He was Czech, maybe.
Yeah, check him out. Anyway, sometimes when we think a teller is not getting the story right, it means that the storyteller is not telling the story we would prefer to be told, or that we think is being told. Digressions and misdirections may not be errors so much as the enactment of another story entirely, one that is being told, but one that we're not quite able to hear. Bruce Jackson, The Story is True, The Art and Meaning of Telling Stories. There's something they aren't telling us, something we don't know about. There's more to it. There's always more to it. This is what history consists of. It's the sum total of all the things they aren't telling us. David Ferry and Don DeLillo's Libra. My favorite sexual assailant in that book.
There's so many,
in real life.
There's so many to choose from, but I agree, and it's definitely one of Joe Pesci's best roles.
Oh man, I think probably the only gay role he's ever had. Let's see. He was more of a hedonist, more of a John Waters-esque pervert. David Ferry was a real person who was kind of the handler of Lee Harvey Oswald. So, a true glowy. By the time of his indictment on April 27th, 1995, Timothy McVeigh had already been depicted as a demon, a lone wolf, or one of a pack. A CIA agent, an FBI informant, patsy, government guinea pig, disgruntled soldier, fallen war hero, loser, loner, gun nut, and conspiracy theorist. In the chapters that follow, I will examine the origins of all of these stories, compare several existing works about him to each other, and introduce new, never-before-published information, thereby offering a hidden biography of Timothy McVeigh. In many ways, this book is a story about stories. The people who tell stories, the stories they tell, and the reasons they tell them. Before telling Before telling McVeigh's backstory, I want to briefly outline 5 commonly told narrative variations: the lone wolf, the pack of wolves, the closely watched wolves, the guilty agent, and the experimental wolf. The experimental wolf was the one I was thinking of that I couldn't place. Um, also,
which is also the most interesting one.
This this segment reminds me of Haddock's Eyes. If you're familiar with Haddock's Eyes, do you know what that is?
No, I'm not.
Okay, Haddock's Eyes is a segment from Through the Looking Glass, and it's the song that the White Knight sings, and it's all about. So here's the segment. So he says, the name of the song is called Haddock's Eyes. Oh, that's the name of the song, is it? Alice said, trying to feel interested. No, you don't understand, the knight said, looking a little vexed. That's what the name is called. The name really is The Aged Man. Then you ought to have said that. That's what the song is called. Alice corrected herself. No, you oughtn't. That's quite another thing. The song is called Ways and Means, but that's only what it's called, you know. Well, what is the song then? Said Alice, who was by this time completely bewildered. I was coming to that, the knight said. The song really is A Sitting on a Gate, and the tune's my own invention. And so basically it's just the name of the song is called Haddock's Eyes, but the name of the song actually is The Aged Man. The song is called Ways and Means, but the song is A Sitting on a Gate. So it's just the stories they tell, the stories told about them, etc. It's that. Anyway,
kind of a Shaggy Dog story.
A little bit, yeah. Okay,
Gabe, you will get all the cuck legs you can hate.
We serve buffalo fried and lemon pepper cuck legs around here. Let's see. The lone wolf. The lone wolf narrative is the least complex and most widely known account of the Oklahoma City bombing, and the one officially endorsed by the U.S. government. In this story, McVeigh, alone, motivated by his anger over the federal government's actions at Waco, conceived of and executed the bombing plot. While this former Army buddy, Terry Nichols, provided minimal assistance by helping McVeigh gather components for the bomb and assisting to build it, he did so under duress, fearing for the life of his family, whom McVeigh threatened. Then McVeigh alone drove to Oklahoma City the morning of April 19th, 1995, to detonate it. In Lone Wolf stories, all details of the plot and identities, motives, movements, and actions of perpetrators are known. Additional unapprehended accomplices and co-conspirators do not exist, and no stone has been left unturned. No mystery remains, and the narrative closure is achieved. As with all the other narrative types, the Lone Wolf story originated with multiple individuals and institutions and appeared prior to McVeigh's and Nichols' trials or convictions in news reports, biographical works, and in McVeigh's own letters and conversations with his defense team and reporters. Today, the Lone Wolf story is not only inscribed upon geographical locations, memorials, but also permanently embedded in consciousness and collective national memory. This is where I love this chapter of this because it's painting really getting into some McLuhan-esque kind of awareness of narrative construction.
As Gabe would say, it's Baudrillardian.
Sure. And that's more of as Mike of Pole would say, and as Gabe would listen to and pretend he's read Baudrillard. While many of the McVeigh as Lone Wolf accounts have been published, the most enduring and well-known of them, and the one that continues to inform expert, academic, and popular understandings of both the bombing and the man executed for it, is the one McVeigh himself narrated to Dan Herbeck and Lou Mitchell for their 2001 authorized biography, American Terrorist, Timothy McVeigh and the Oklahoma City Bombing. According to the authors, despite the ongoing appearance of his leaked confessions and news report, McVeigh's public silence about his exact role in the bombing left room for the proliferation of conspiracy theories. But unlike Lee Harvey Oswald, there was still a chance to let McVeigh tell his story. The authors wrote that by letting him do so, They hoped to circumvent the specter of unresolved issues that surrounded the JFK assassination. With the publication of American Terrorist, readers are told McVeigh irrefutably becomes the confessed bomber of the Murrah Building in OKC. McVeigh's motives for cooperating with the authors are more than a bit ironic. While readers learn of his lifelong fascination with conspiracy theories, McVeigh had hoped to refute the conspiracy theories surrounding the bombing and himself, especially those propagated by his former attorney, Stephen Jones. Therefore, McVeigh and the authors spent a considerable amount of time addressing competing accounts and theories and denying McVeigh's documented connections to other violent extremists, the existence of JD2 or 3 or 4, or any other related big conspiracy. According to Herbeck and Mitchell, McVeigh told them his story with such frank intensity and candor, held nothing back, and provided a depth of detail that jibed with witness testimony. It's not jived?
I thought it was jived.
Yeah.
They like the cut of his jib.
Yeah. Interesting. And perfectly fit with the official counts offered by the FBI, investigators, and prosecutors. They had no reason to question his honesty and wholeheartedly believed that the story he orated. Aggressively asserting the role of lone wolf mastermind bomber to his official biographers, McVeigh claimed to have carefully planned his actions down to the tiniest minutia, including the John Wilkes Booth t-shirt he wore the morning of the bombing. He said he had hoped the bombing would act as a shot heard round the world, which would inspire and catalyze other revolutionary acts. So yeah, I mean, he essentially got in the authorized biography, essentially got to tell the story he wanted to tell at trial, but his attorneys resisted, just saying it was him, he did it all, et cetera, et cetera. FBI special agents John Hersley and Larry Tongate, two lead investigators in the case, felt compelled in their 2004 book, Simple Truths, The Real Story of the Oklahoma City Bombing Investigation, to correct various inaccurate and irresponsible theories that this notorious event spawned, and tell the real story of the Oklahoma bombing. Restating their intentions throughout the book, the authors offer a much-needed factual history of the case, and Simple Truths purports to offer a contribution to accuracy and history. Tongate and Hersley summarized and advanced the FBI's conclusion, and the case prosecutors presented at the criminal trials of McVeigh and Nichols, and assert that having turned over every stone and followed every lead, all other theories proved implausible, and no credible evidence existed that anyone other than McVeigh and Nichols were involved. After all, they emphasize, McVeigh himself admitted such. In his introduction to the book, retired FBI agent and governor of Oklahoma at the time of the bombing, Frank Keating, described the bombing as an act of monstrous evil, but assured readers that Simple Truths is the closed book on the case.
Why would he lie?
Two evil men did this, and two evil men paid. Simple Truths is illustrative of the way in which the government's lone wolf story is oddly similar to McVeigh's own. Almost like there was some sort of connection there that may not have been explicit.
You're looking too deeply into this.
Yes, I suppose.
You've had a little too much to think, comrade.
I suppose I should listen to the experts.
We are expert trusters on this podcast.
Expert trusters.
I'm gonna troost.
Yeah. All right. Speaking of trusting, the pack of wolves and those closely watched. In cases of high-profile American assassinations, where one lone gunman appears, alternate accounts inevitably emerge, asserting the involvement of multiple shooters and competing claims about their identities. Multiple gunmen rumored to have been involved in the assassination of John F. Kennedy include, but are not limited to, the CIA, KGB, Secret Service, Mossad, Mafia, anti-Castro Cubans, a plethora of intelligence operatives including Howard Hunt, David Ferry, the Three Tramps, Man with the Umbrella, Black Dog Man, and Lee Harvey Oswald. Likewise, in some stories about the Oklahoma City bombing, where lone wolf bomber McVeigh appears, others follow closely behind who populate a second, more thematically complex genre of narratives collectively referred to as the Pack of Wolves. Unlike the uniformity of lone wolf narratives, pack stories have distinct variations: the pack and the pack closely watched. So, all of these names really sound like X-Files supporting spooks, don't they?
Yeah, no, if I had to be anybody, I would be the man with the umbrella.
Really? Oh, I'm all about Black Dog Man. Black Dog Man is like, a good black lab, on a walk, just around engaging in conspiracies. Like, it's a great day. It's a great day. Within all pack stories and their subvariants, McVeigh is no longer the mastermind or primary villain in the bombing plot, never acts entirely alone, and is always one of several additional unidentified and or unapprehended conspirators who helped conceive of, plan, fund, and execute the bombing. Therefore, McVeigh's culpability is mitigated and his role usurped by others unknown. The others are composed of several individuals who, over time, have become a single composite character widely known as John Doe Number 2. Within the various descriptions of the pack, identities of the others unknown differ and may include a range of candidates: Islamic jihadists, the Irish Republican Army, Colombian drug lords, but most often neo-Nazi bank robbers and or others within the white power movement. While the identities and roles of others remain the subject of inquiry and speculation, their involvement and sometimes even their existence are officially denied. Unlike the lone wolf template, that bases its claims to truth on the existence of even their on truth on known information, and achieves total narrative closure. The defining quality of pack stories and all other variants is the unknown, and thus an inability to achieve resolution. Pack accounts explain how, while over 226 people reported seeing one or more John Does with McVeigh in the months before the bombing, everyone who saw him in OKC the morning of the explosion saw him with these others. Pack stories also explain how the participation of these others was obscured from history by the disguises and decoy vehicles they used, generating a myriad of contradictory eyewitness descriptions of them. This confusion led to several permutations of a single conspiracy theory, all involving the officially denied others. Recurring themes and elements in the stories about the pack of watched wolves include covert surveillance practices conducted mostly by the FBI and ATF, and the ongoing presence of undercover federal informants, agents, provocateurs, and spies who, throughout the plot, pose as true pack wolves, all while passing information to their government handlers. In these stories, McVeigh becomes part of a sting operation gone horribly awry, which is really, that's more of I feel like that's more of the guilty agent.
Yeah, it's a little, she's picking at hairs there, I'd say.
Also, hello Vulpes. Welcome all OGCers.
Yes, now that the OGC event is over, you guys can listen to a bunch of internet schizophrenics.
And also, if there's no Oklahoma City chapter of the OGC, allow us to recommend the Oklahoma Dissidents. It's which you can hear about in the first half of this episode. Drink of water. There we go. Let's see. In their failure to prevent the bombing, the government assumes a degree of culpability ranging from failure to act on intelligence, sometimes vague, sometimes detailed, and warnings of the impending bombings, as well as accusations that they orchestrated it. All pack stories allege that various government agencies have engaged in a cover-up by intentionally distorting and withholding facts about the bombing from the public. Like all other variants, pack stories appeared publicly immediately after McVeigh's arrest and proliferated during the years leading to McVeigh's 2001 execution, often via works of investigative journalism and news reports that connected him to various players in the white power movement and American paramilitary underground. While all lone wolf accounts have remained uniform and consistent after McVeigh's execution, pack stories have become increasingly complex due in part to the continuing emergence of case-related information resulting from ongoing formal and informal investigative, legal, and academic efforts. Yeah, you would think that it would get increasingly complicated because you have some unknown group of other people, and every time you have some evidence leading to a probable identity of one of them, then you have to then incorporate them into the story and like, oh well, what did they do, where were they, when were they there, etc. So
It's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. The guilty agent. In the fourth variation, is that the fourth or the second? It's okay. The kind of had a twofer in the last one. In the fourth variation, McVeigh is depicted not as a lone wolf or even one with a pack of wolves, but as a guilty agent, a witting undercover operative for shadowy defense agencies in a nationwide sting operation, which for one reason or another resulted in the bombing. Guilty agent stories appeared frequently in the works of the conspiracy theory genre prior to the criminal trials of McVeigh and Nichols. For example, John Rappaport's 1995 book, Oklahoma City Bombing, The Suppressed Truth, argues that the bombing plot was unquestionably a conspiracy that subsequently led to a cover-up afterwards. While Rappaport acknowledged that, at the time of his writing, many of the details of this conspiracy and cover-up remained unknown, he nonetheless asserted that both were part of a larger effort by the federal government to run damage control in the aftermath of the Waco debacle, demonize the Patriot movement, and pass anti-terrorism legislation which would expand the budgets and powers of various government agencies, thereby allowing them to further suppress the movement. It's almost like one of these fits the evidence best.
No, he did it by himself, and everybody knows it. You know it, I know it.
All alone, just tinkering with bomb-making materials, and his buddy Terry.
And Terry's wife.
And you mean Michael's wife?
Or whoever. Well, she's everybody's wife.
The corporate wife, yeah. Rather than, don't you mean our wife, comrade? Rather than espousing a unified theory about the exact workings and details involved in the bombing plot, Rappaport presented several scenarios other than the then dominant lone wolf story. Rappaport asserted that if any of the alternate scenarios outlined proved true, it was likely that McVeigh had not been fully aware of all of the details of the plot he was involved in, but was more likely an amateur participant within a visible part of a larger, sophisticated operation, a delivery man, blamable man, fall guy, throwaway, dupe, patsy, big idiot, goofball, just a dopey guy.
Tim Walz?
Tim Walz. So goes the fate.
Where was he's from Nebraska? Where was Tim Walz in 1995?
Oh God.
He wasn't in Iraq, I can tell you that.
After McVeigh's arrest, so-called conspiracy theorists were linked to terrorism. This new batch of potential terrorists and their supporters co-opted the discourse of counterterrorism pundits by claiming the bombing itself was a result of conspiracy. And while the exact nature of this conspiracy was not yet known, they believed that the covert state actors played a part in the carnage. In the years after McVeigh's trial and execution, guilty agent depictions of McVeigh have continued to proliferate online and in self-published books. In this book, I discuss new information which has surfaced since 2001 and introduce new evidence to show how guilty agent theories originally rooted in stories told by McVeigh himself, both prior to and after the bombing, and how stories such as these may be more plausible than previously imagined. The experimental wolf. Finally, the most fun one. Finally, experimental
and
wolf narrative.
Most likely to be true.
The most fun one, and therefore the one I'm banking on. Experimental wolf narratives.
The whole reason that we have a podcast.
The whole reason. Experimental wolf narratives break with many previous understandings of the bombing story and the life of Timothy McVeigh, and often disrupt linearity and agency normally ascribed to him. In them, McVeigh, the ultimate conspiracy theorist, is rendered the victim of a conspiracy, a dupe, a guilty agent lacking real agency, a traumatized automaton suffering from agency panic, the sense of being shaped. Automaton mentioned. The sense of being shaped or controlled by powerful external forces, and sometimes Generation X's own Manchurian Candidate. Within many of these theories, either during or after his time in the Army, McVeigh was a test subject for classified experimental or refined procedures until after his arrest. McVeigh is thus depicted as a human guinea pig who, unbeknownst even to himself, depending on the version articulated, is influenced, tracked, and controlled by a number of mysterious technologies, drugs, and methods, manipulated by mad scientists operating out of black budget staging grounds in a number of geographical locations. Recurring themes and elements may include high-level, officially sanctioned architects of death, brainwashed automatons, and from time to time, UFOs.
You can see why this is our favorite one.
This is the most fun one. A close reading of previous experimental texts reveals a wide range of emergent literary and cultural themes found in works of science fiction, but that originate from or reflect actual historic and current circumstances, events, and practices. We will outline and compare various interpretations of all experimental stories about McVeigh or others, and explore related themes in texts and the many variations of experimental narratives, including those about post-traumatic stress disorder, Gulf War syndrome, and the most common of these, brainwashing and or mind control. We will closely examine stories told by and about McVeigh and or fictional ones similar to those that appeared and circulated immediately after his arrest. For instance, within days, countless news articles reported that McVeigh told a number of people he believed the Army embedded a computer chip in his buttocks very quickly so that they could track that ass. Very quickly, the reports noted, the black helicopter crowd suggested that he was a victim of mind control experiments. Many variations of experimental stories appeared online and in book-length works prior to McVeigh's execution. More recently, they've appeared in fictional works like Tracy Lett's 2006 play Bug and its 2007 film adaptation of the same name, as well as January 2010 episode of Conspiracy Theory with Jesse Ventura, based, entitled Manchurian Candidate.
Yeah, this sounds like a drive time movie night.
Bug kind of is on the list, actually.
Wonderful.
Though no proponent of the experimental variation has yet tested these consequently unsubstantiated claims against oral and archival records, in this book, I reveal a number of obscure and startling contextual and biographical details about McVeigh. In constructing this experimental history, I employ both fictional and non-fictional texts, including those about McVeigh, and update readers on recent controversial and provocative bioethical issues surrounding, amongst other practices, the use of non-lethal interrogation. Lethal interrogation would be way more interesting. Surveillance and soldier enhancement methods. Like all others discussed thus far, McVeigh first articulated various contradictory versions of these stories privately prior to the bombing, and many appeared publicly within days of his arrest. While acknowledging the existence of others unknown and multiple John Does, experimental stories emphasized McVeigh's powerlessness over his own actions, making his final statement, "I am the master of my fate, the captain of my soul," rather ironic. Perhaps one valuable contribution made by this writing is the demonstration of an underlying medical and psychological narrative that, while largely unknown, underpins a number of fictional and non-fiction representations of McVeigh. This hidden narrative sheds light on or helps clarify unknown or unresolved biographical elements of McVeigh's life, controversies surrounding the Gulf War, and contributes to a number of larger ongoing discussions and debates surrounding the current U.S. government, military, and medical policies and practices. We will also explore a nearly hidden history of McVeigh's participation and experiences in the Gulf War. Hello, Owen Zaleski. Thank you for joining us. All experimental stories or variations thereof are important, no matter their truth or the actual secrets they reveal. So true. We do love the things regardless of the truth.
More spiritually true than
spiritually true.
Actually true.
Yes. As within all subcategories inscribed within McVeigh's very body, symbolically or actually, are effects of militarism and warfare. Mind control or experimental stories help us understand possible motives left unexplored about McVeigh's motivation to participate in the bombing plot, whether as lone wolf, a part of a pack, or a guilty agent.
And
Absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. So that's what you can. That's a little. You've gone through orientation class.
Yep.
You can now see where we're going with this. These are some of the ways we're going to try to unpack things.
And I think we can pick it up next time with chapter 1.
You don't want to press on?
I'm being wage cucked at the moment.
Unfortunate, deeply unfortunate. Well, we got a good 2 hours in. Next time we'll shoot for 3, and we'll be live again next week. Right?
Any closing thoughts, Cap?
Yeah. Well, does anyone have any questions?
Yes, questions in the chat.
Questions in chat. Throw up those cues. You're gonna have to do it quickly though, because we're not just gonna hang around here with our thumbs up.
We're not leaving until I get at least 3 questions.
3 questions. Look, Gabe, to be clear, Hudson started this show sick and sniffly. And so
how does it feel to be a wage cuck? It's not great. I will be the first one to tell you, Mr. EL. Wage cucking is probably the worst of the cuckings.
You would literally have rather have someone.
No, I take all of that back. It's actually not bad.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know about that. I'm a based self-employed man. Owen, you are so lucky because there's actually 2 previous episodes you can listen to, and because you joined late, you basically have an hour and a half of this one that you still get to listen to. So lucky. I wish that we were also fortunate.
Yes, I too wish that I could forget the last 2 hours.
You can. There's a lot of ways to do that. It's still short-term memory. And
shut up, Gabe.
And
how many knots do you know? How many knots do you know, Cap? Because I know.
Weren't you in the some form of the military?
Yeah, but
not the Navy.
They call me the Major.
Okay. So Coast Guard. So you know a bunch of knots.
I know.
I know Don Knotts. I know Don Knotts. I know Knott's Berry Farm.
I know not to volunteer for anything.
Yeah, I know how to shout "Take the knot" when some petite woman is walking her Great Dane. Yeah, I guess 4.
What's the most you ever cucked for a few shackles? I have never cucked for shackles, sir. I am the captain of my soul.
The Femgooner episode of Sidebar is a great one. Everyone should listen to that. But you should also listen to this Library of Mass Destruction, a completely different show. Just saying.
Quite possibly the greatest assembly of internet autism since the Sidebar podcast.
So true. I'm also going to do something that might be a little weird, but I hope you'll follow along with me. Since so few of you were there for our intro, and I'm very proud of it. I'm gonna play the intro as an outro as well.
Play me off, Cap.
Yeah, so we'll play you out. Make sure it's short. It's short, but I think it'll keep you. I think it'll keep you coming back for more. So next week, 7 Central Time, God's time, we will see you again. Thanks for joining us.